Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a collection of sources that offer a really sharp snapshot of the pressures and power plays shaping our world right now.
Yeah, it's quite a mix.
We'll be looking at everything from the fight for transparency in high-profile cases to, critical public health decisions and even chilling global cyber threats. It's all about accountability, the integrity of our institutions, and that constant tension, really, between political maneuvering and public welfare.
That's right. Our goal, as always, is to navigate these complex issues with you, sort of distill the most crucial insights and connect the dots. It's about understanding not just the headlines, but the underlying forces at play and what these developments mean for you and, well, our shared future.
Okay, great.
So let's get started.
Let's start with a really unusual situation brewing in the House regarding the demand for transparency around the Jeffrey Epstein files. And here's where it gets interesting. Speaker Mike Johnson is actually warning his own Republican members not to sign a discharge petition.
Which is unusual.
Right. For those less familiar, what exactly is a discharge petition and why is Johnson trying to block it?
Well, a discharge petition is a rarely used but potent procedural tool. If a simple majority of House members sign it,
Just a majority.
yeah, just a majority, it forces a vote on a bill or resolution directly to the floor, completely bypasses committee leadership.
Okay.
In this specific case, the petition, which was crafted by Rep. Thomas Massie, it aims to compel the Department of Justice to release all the Epstein files. And critically, it stipulates that only victims' names would be redacted, not alleged perpetrator.
Okay. So not redacting the potential perpetrator.
Exactly. But Speaker Johnson, he's arguing that the current approach by Rep. James Comer, which involves, asking the DOJ for documents that often come back heavily redacted, is sufficient. He's essentially trying to control the flow of information, keep it in committee.
But Massie and others, they're just not buying that the DOJ can be trusted with those redactions. Our sources describe him actually holding up his phone, showing a flight log from an initial DoJ document dump where, every single name was blacked out.
Wow. Every name.
Every single one. He made a pretty compelling case, saying, and I'm quoting here, "What's clear is they're not redacting just to protect victims, they're redacting to protect reputations." Quote, "Some of those people are probably innocent, but some of them are most certainly guilty."
That's a strong statement.
It is, and what makes this push for transparency even more fascinating is the surprisingly bipartisan effort behind it.
Absolutely. The bipartisan nature is key here. To pull this petition out of committee, it needs 6 Republican votes, assuming all Democrats support it.
Okay, 6 Republicans.
So far, we've seen 4 Republicans publicly commit. Massie, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And on the Democratic side, Rep. Ro Khanna is actually a co-sponsor.
Interesting mix.
Yeah, and the motivations are quite varied and personal, too. Rep. Nancy Mace, for instance, she met with Epstein's victims, describing how their stories led her to a full-blown panic attack. That no doubt influenced her decision to buck leadership.
Wow. And speaking of surprising alliances, that news conference held by Massie and Khanna with Greene and some survivors present, apparently it had a particularly unexpected moment.
Oh.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, known for her, let's say, controversial rhetoric, reportedly gave a surprisingly serious speech, defending and praising the women Epstein abused.
Huh.
The source is highlighted as seemingly genuine, and it's perhaps noteworthy that 3 of the 4 Republicans who've signed are women.
That is noteworthy.
But what's the ultimate, so what here for justice? Is this just political theater, or could it genuinely lead to more accountability?
Well, it could lead to significant accountability. Beyond just the political pressure, we're seeing another crucial development, the victims themselves. They are now collaboratively compiling their own master list of alleged perpetrators.
Oh, interesting. So bypassing the official channels.
Exactly. Epstein accuser Lisa Phillips told NBC News that victims are pooling their individual lists. If many rich and powerful individuals are on this collective list, it could trigger major fireworks, think potential lawsuits, and the prospect of these alleged perpetrators facing cross-examination under oath in public trials.
Right, under oath. That's a powerful path to justice that bypasses the DoJ entirely.
Definitely.
Okay, from this fight for transparency, let's pivot to another high-stakes political battle unfolding on Capitol Hill, one that directly impacts how our government functions. The government funding fight.
Ah, yes, the funding battles.
Our sources are even calling rescission the word of the year. What exactly is a rescission bill, and why is this particular strategy causing such a stir? especially given how it seems to challenge established norms.
Right. So rescission refers to a strategy, and it's strongly advocated by figures like Russell Vought to effectively undo parts of a bipartisan spending agreement after it's already been passed.
After the fact, how does that work?
Well, the process involves introducing a rescission bill, and this is key. It cannot be filibustered in the Senate.
Okay. No filibuster.
Right, and it's used to remove components that Democrats, for example, might have insisted on during the initial negotiations. And a pocket rescission is even more aggressive. Once such a bill is introduced, the president can simply, well, refrain from spending already appropriated money for 45 days.
Not spend it.
Just not spend it. And if the fiscal year ends within that 45-day period, no vote is even needed. It essentially allows the president to impound, say, $5 billion in foreign aid he doesn't want to spend without any congressional approval.
Wow. That sounds like a direct challenge to Congress's whole power of the purse.
It is.
And while it naturally infuriates Democrats, it's also deeply upsetting some Senate Republicans, too.
That's right. People like Susan Collins, John Thune, Lisa Murkowski, they're expressing strong concerns. Calling it unlawful or arguing it fundamentally undermines the entire appropriations process.
Senator Collins explicitly stated, any effort to rescind appropriated funds without congressional approval is a clear violation of the law.
Pretty direct language.
Yeah. So what are the long-term constitutional implications if this kind of approach gains traction?
Well, the long-term implication is a significant shift in the balance of power, specifically challenging Congress's foundational constitutional responsibility for funding. Senator Murkowski, for example, she tweeted, "Congress alone bears the constitutional responsibility for funding our government."
Right.
And any effort to claw back resources outside of the appropriations process undermines that responsibility. And on a practical level, as Catherine Cortez Masto noted, most Americans don't really understand these complex Senate procedures. They just want their leaders to solve problems, right? Not create new ones by challenging fundamental governmental structures.
Makes sense, but the outlook for resolving this isn't great, is it?
It doesn't look good.
Rachel Bade, Politico's Capitol Bureau Chief, she predicts Democrats can't ultimately win this fight. She suggests if they block appropriations bills, Republicans will just hold vote after vote, framing it so the public blames Democrats for, trash piling up in national parks, government services halting.
The shutdown blame game.
Exactly. Many Republicans, she believes, are actually quite content to see the government shut down as a way to shrink it. So what's the exit strategy for Democrats if Republicans just refuse to budge on this?
Well, Bates suggests there isn't really a good one. She foresees Democrats eventually caving after, months of pain, which would only strengthen a potential future administration's grip on Congress. Even stopgap continuing resolutions, they just kick the can down the road.
Right, just delays the inevitable.
Exactly. Leads to the same outcome. It really highlights a deep strategic impasse where one side seems willing to challenge the very mechanisms of governance for, well, a political win.
Okay, from that legislative gridlock impacting federal funding, we now see these same forces of political maneuvering kind of descending into local elections. There's a surprising development in the New York City mayoral race.
Oh, yeah.
Our sources suggest Donald Trump is trying to pull a rabbit out of his Mijie hat, reportedly afraid of Zoran Kwame Mamdani, a 33-year-old immigrant from Africa who's apparently polling surprisingly well.
Mamdani. Okay, what's Trump's strategy here?
Well, reportedly, he's being urged on by billionaire donors in NYC who are, quote, petrified of Mamdani.
Uh-huh.
So Trump's strategy is to try and convince independent candidate Eric Adams, the current mayor, and Republican Curtis Sliwa to drop out of the race.
Get them both out. Why?
The explicit aim is to turn it into a head-to-head contest between Mamdani and former NY Governor Andrew Cuomo. Basically, manipulate the field to get a preferred outcome for his allies.
Cuomo versus Mamdani. Interesting. And how is Trump planning to achieve this? Just ask them nicely.
Apparently, he's considering offering Adams and Sliwa jobs in his administration.
Jobs? Like what?
Well, historically, he's tended to offer rather minor roles like, ambassador to Tuvalu or something.
Right. Chuckles slightly.
But the sources suggest that since both Adams and Sliwa have law enforcement backgrounds, something like director or deputy director of the FBI might actually be genuinely appealing to them.
Okay, that's a bit more substantial than Tuvalu. That's where the calculation gets interesting. There's also the possibility that Republican megadonor John Katsimatidis, he owns supermarket chains and is also reportedly petrified of Mamdani.
Right, the supermarket guy.
Yeah. He could offer them well-paying jobs in his companies, but a federal law enforcement position might indeed be more attractive to them, especially given their backgrounds. Probably don't know much about vegetables, as the source hinted.
Jules, right. It's certainly an audacious plan. But looking at the numbers, Mamdani polling at 42%, Cuomo at 23%, Sliwa at 17%, and Adams down at 9%. What are the chances this plan actually works? Are there significant hurdles?
Oh, the challenges are substantial. Huge hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
First, Adams and Sliwa probably couldn't even get their names off the ballot easily at this point. It might be too late.
Okay, procedural issue.
And second, and maybe more critically, there's just no guarantee their supporters would simply switch to Cuomo. Many might choose Mamdani or just stay home. Yeah.
Sure, they're very different bases.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this whole stunt could easily backfire and fail to achieve Trump's desired outcome. Cuomo would need almost all of Adams's and Sliwa's supporters to switch to him, which is a very, very big ask. Pretty unlikely.
Okay, from these political battles over power and strategy, we now turn to a domain where policy decisions have, well, immediate life or death consequences. Public health.
Right. High stakes.
The calls for HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. to resign highlight a profound split between science and partisanship. Over 1,000 former and current HHS staffers have signed a letter demanding his removal, citing very serious concerns.
Yeah, over 1,000, that's significant. The letter, signed by individuals rather than organizations, which is interesting in itself. It highlights critical issues like the removal of CDC Director Susan Monterez and the resignations of 4 other top CDC leaders. The core belief expressed in the letter is pretty clear. Health policy should be based in strong, evidence-based principles rather than partisan politics.
And they say...
Right. They state clearly that under Kennedy's leadership, HHS policies are placing the health of all Americans at risk regardless of their politics.
Wow. Regardless of politics, that puts Donald Trump in a bit of a political bind, doesn't it?
Some bind.
He's aligned himself so closely with Kennedy and the anti-vax sentiment in his base. But our sources point out a serious dilemma. If Kennedy goes off the rails, banning vaccines, potentially leading to high-profile preventable deaths, well, Trump would likely get the blame.
Absolutely. He'd own it.
Plus, this alignment makes it impossible for him to take credit for Operation Warp Speed, right? Which was arguably one of his administration's biggest achievements in accelerating COVID vaccine development.
Completely negates it. So what's the real political cost-benefit analysis for Trump here?
It's a classic lose-lose proposition, politically speaking. He has to weigh the significant blowback from potentially keeping Kennedy, leading to those preventable deaths, against the blowback from his anti-vax base if he fires Kennedy and replaces him with a more experienced, science-driven medical professional.
Damned if he does, damned if he doesn't.
Pretty much. Even send Bill Cassidy, who's a physician and chairman of the HELP committee overseeing HHS.
Right, he could have stopped the confirmation.
Exactly. Could have torpedoed Kennedy's confirmation.
Yeah.
But now he's only tweeting vaguely about CDC oversight, apparently fearing a primary opponent from Trump if he speaks out directly against Kennedy. Our sources frankly describe this as a profile encouraged. This is not.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Politics over principle, perhaps?
It's certainly a difficult spot for those in power, but we are seeing courage elsewhere. The governors of California, Oregon, and Washington, they've announced a health alliance.
A health alliance. What does that entail?
They plan to coordinate vaccine recommendations for their states, explicitly stating that the CDC has become a political tool that peddles ideology instead of science.
Wow, that's a direct shot at the CDC, a pretty dramatic step.
It truly is. This move immediately raises a whole raft of federalism questions that are going to be extensively tested.
For sure. Because while healthcare is largely run by states,
Right.
having 2 sets of recommendations, federal and state, we'll quickly see practical questions pop up, like, will health insurance cover state-recommended but not federally endorsed vaccinations? Will pharmacies and GPs even provide them?
Big questions. It's a significant challenge to what has historically been a unified national approach to public health messaging and policy.
Absolutely breaks that unity.
And one of the most stark potential consequences of these shifts in public health policy is captured in this phrase our sources use. Measles strikes back.
Oof. Not a good sign.
No. And just to put this in perspective, before Dr. Edward Jenner's smallpox vaccine back in 1796, smallpox epidemics could wipe out like 10% of the world population?
Unbelievable numbers. Vaccines have been such a monumental achievement, nearly eradicating dozens of fatal diseases.
So it just feels like we're facing a really dangerous return to the past here.
That's exactly right. Most doctors agree that vaccinations are, well, probably the most important advance in medical history. Full stop. All states currently require childhood vaccinations for public school attendance, covering things like measles, mumps, rubella, polio.
The standard one.
Yeah, the standard common diseases. And the result? These diseases are now extremely rare in the U.S. and other countries with similar requirements. It's been a genuine triumph of modern medicine.
Yet, Florida is now taking this dramatic step, phasing out all vaccine mandates, all of them.
All mandates. Wow.
Florida State Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo controversially claimed that mandates are an intrusion of people's rights bordering on slavery.
Slavery. That's extreme language.
Extremely. He's been widely denounced by numerous public health experts, and even Senator Bill Cassidy, who we just discussed, called abolishing the mandates a terrible thing for public health.
Yeah, even Cassidy said that. So what are the immediate and long-term consequences of such a radical policy shift?
Well, the consequences are stark and immediate. Measles has already reappeared among unvaccinated people in Texas.
It's already happening.
Right. So we can expect a resurgence of these once-eradicated diseases. Parents in Florida may now opt out of vaccinating their children, especially if insurance stops covering state-recommended but not federally endorsed vaccines.
Right, the insurance angle is huge.
And this doesn't just put their own children at risk. It tragically endangers immunocompromised children, kids undergoing chemotherapy, for example, who cannot be vaccinated, even if their parents desperately want them to be.
That's the really heartbreaking part, the herd immunity aspect.
Exactly. Our sources even reference this pretty intense ethical debate from the Bulwark podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
Where some argue that people should feel the consequences of their votes if their kids die due to anti-vax stances, while others, of course, strongly disagree, saying it's not the children's fault.
Wow, that's a brutal debate.
It's a brutal and provocative thought, suggesting, quote, nature may remove the anti-vax gene from the gene pool.
But looking ahead, is Florida just an outlier here, or are we seeing a broader trend?
Unfortunately, the prediction is that Florida won't be the last state to drop vaccine mandates. Multiple red states are expected to follow suit, effectively taking them back to 1795, or even the late Middle Ages, as one source put it, in terms of public health preparedness.
Back to 1795.
It stands in such stark contrast to the national triumph of Dr. Jonas Salk's polio vaccine in the 1950s. That was celebrated as monumental news across the country, uniting people in the fight against disease.
Yeah, a totally different era. This feels like a dramatic rollback of those public health achievements.
A huge rollback. Okay. From public health policy battles, let's shift our lens to broader institutional integrity and resistance, starting with Harvard University, which just won round one in court against Donald Trump.
Harvard, yes.
Our sources frame this as part of Trump's broader plan to, quote, subjugate all possible sources of resistance, including our country's premier universities.
Right. And while many universities apparently caved to pressure and paid millions in tribute to prevent funding cuts, Harvard stood firm. They sued to restore $2 billion in research funds. And U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs ruled squarely in Harvard's favor. She stated that Trump's nominal reason for the cuts combating anti-Semitism had, quote, nothing to do with research funding for cancer, Alzheimer's, and other studies.
So she saw right through it.
Clearly saw through the pretext, called it an ideologically motivated assault on this country's premier universities, aimed at Harvard's governance, staffing, and admissions, rather than genuine concern about anti-Semitism.
Okay, that sounds like a major win for Harvard. And by extension, maybe for other universities that might have felt pressured.
It's definitely a win.
But is Harvard completely out of the woods yet? Or is this just the first round in a potentially longer fight?
Oh, it's definitely just the first round. The government will appeal this ruling first to the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Right.
And then potentially to the Supreme Court, which, as the source notes, generally gives Trump whatever he wants. Plus, Trump has pursued other punitive measures, like attempting to strip Harvard of its ability to enroll foreign students, a key revenue source, and threatening its accreditation. That's also being litigated. So, yeah, the battle isn't over.
And there were even rumors, right, that Harvard was discussing terms of surrender, possibly paying $500 million in that tribute.
Yeah, those rumors are out there.
So, given Judge Burroughs' ruling now, how does this significantly strengthen Harvard's negotiating position? And what might Trump's calculus be for a settlement now?
Well, the ruling absolutely strengthens Harvard's hand, massively. They now have a much stronger option to continue the fight, and they're likely to win the appeal at the First Circuit.
Okay.
Trump, on the other hand, probably wants to avoid a clear Supreme Court ruling that says he cannot arbitrarily break government contracts based on fake premises.
Why is that?
Well, it could put him on a collision course with the court and alienate independent voters. So, consequently, he might now be willing to accept a much lower tribute, perhaps $100 million, just to settle the matter quickly and avoid more legal and political scrutiny.
Make you go away.
Exactly, even if it sets a really troubling precedent for the future.
Okay, from this battle for institutional independence, let's connect to another instance of politically driven decisions impacting national strategy. The ongoing, highly politicized battle over the U.S. Space Command headquarters.
Ah, Space Command.
Yeah.
Yes.
Decisions like this, they're often framed as being about facts and what makes sense,
Yeah.
but as we've often seen, they're usually mostly based on politics.
Just like the Johnson Space Center ending up in Texas.
Exactly, not Florida. That's a perfect historical analogy. The main alternatives for the Space Command HQ were Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Huntsville, Alabama.
Right.
In his first term, Trump initially decided on Huntsville,
Yeah.
but then President Biden subsequently moved it back to Colorado Springs.
Citing the clear operational advantages and all the existing infrastructure there, right? Multiple Space Force bases, NORAD, U.S. Northcom, the Air Force Academy, a big aerospace industry. It made sense operationally.
Logically, yes. But Trump isn't letting that decision stand, is he?
Yep.
He's now decided to move Space Command back to Huntsville.
Again. Back again. Okay.
Our sources indicate his motivation has very little to do with actual space operations and far more to do with Colorado voting against him in multiple elections, and even its mail-in voting system.
So pure politics driving a major military basing decision.
Yeah.
What are the practical consequences of this kind of political ping-pong for our national defense capabilities and for the Space Force itself?
Well, the practical consequences are pretty severe for readiness. Moving the command every 4 years fundamentally hinders our national defense capabilities. It's disruptive.
Massively disruptive. Think about the personnel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Space Force personnel are forced to relocate, disrupting their lives, their families, and most importantly, their operations.
Yeah.
The governor and the entire congressional delegation of Colorado, including Republican Rep. Lauren Boebert, they are up in arms.
Even Boebert. Okay.
Yeah. Arguing it wastes taxpayer money and offers zero advantages over Colorado Springs. But, it's highly unlikely Trump will pay any attention to their protests. The political motivation seems to clearly outweigh any operational efficiency concerns.
Politics trumps readiness. Got it.
Okay, from these political battles impacting institutions and national strategy, we have to now confront something far more immediate and potentially catastrophic for national security. A chilling development in cyber warfare. The Salt Typhoon Chinese cyber attack. It was apparently much worse than previously thought, hitting over 80 countries. Described as the most ambitious and successful cyber attack ever.
Wow. Salt typhoon. That sounds truly terrifying.
It absolutely is. This attack presents 3 grave dangers, according to the sources.
Okay, what are they?
First, hackers likely scooped up massive amounts of incredibly valuable information, everything from chip designs, corporate secrets, to personal data on Americans, potentially useful for blackmail or strategic intelligence.
Okay, data theft. What else?
Second, cell phones may have been infected, allowing for persistent tracking of politicians, military leaders, spies, activists.
Anyone of interest.
Constant surveillance.
And the third?
And third, and this is maybe the most critical, vital infrastructure was likely penetrated, with backdoors planted for future sabotage.
A sabotage. Okay, that's the really scary one.
Yeah, and our sources paint a truly chilling scenario here. Imagine, China invades Taiwan, the U.S. starts to respond, and suddenly, poof, all electric power in D.C., and the Pentagon goes out. Military computer systems just refuse to run. Major internet providers like AT&T and Verizon are disabled, blacking out television and phone service across the country.
That's paralyzing, a digital Pearl Harbor almost. It's a frightening thought, but what has the U.S. government's response been to this unprecedented threat?
Well, unfortunately, the response has been profoundly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And frankly damaging.
How so?
Despite knowing about Chinese hacking for a long time, the Trump administration fired 4-star General Timothy Ho, head of U.S. Cyber Command and the NSA, a man with decades of cybersecurity experience.
Fired the top guy. Why?
Reportedly on the advice of Laura Loomer, who distrusted his connection to General Mark Milley.
On Loomer's advice? Seriously?
Seriously. 6 National Security Council staffers were also fired on Loomer's advice. And it gets worse. the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA.
CISA, yeah, they're crucial.
They've seen fully 1/3 of their workforce fired or driven out. Why? Because its former director, Chris Krebs, stated the 2020 election wasn't stolen.
So, purging based on election denialism, not competence.
Seems like it. So when you put all of that together, this decimation of expertise and leadership,
Yeah.
what does it mean for the strength of our national cyber defenses as we face these escalating threats?
Well, Rob Joyce, who once led the NSA cybersecurity division, he put it bluntly. He said, "We've backslid.
Backslid.
We didn't just lose the top layer of government, we lost operational capability across any number of departments and agencies, and the private sector isn't picking up the slack either. They're cutting cyber staff."
Early, even now.
Yeah, and 8 in 10 respondents in one survey fear government budget cuts will hinder intelligence sharing between public and private sectors. The bottom line is stark. China has clearly demonstrated its ability to hack almost any U.S. system, including key infrastructure.
Right.
Yet the U.S. government and private companies are actively cutting back on cyber defense capabilities. When the next attack comes, well, there might simply be nobody home to stop it.
Nobody home. Chilling. Okay, from those direct threats to our national security, let's wrap up with a fascinating look behind the curtain of political messaging,
Okay, shifting gears.
where how you frame a policy can be just as important as the policy itself. Republicans recently held a briefing on Capitol Hill. They were told to push the BBB bill, the Build Back Better initiative, which has various social and climate policies.
Right, BBB.
But specifically to talk about tax cuts,
Yeah.
not Medicaid cuts or other spending. Focus on the cuts.
Ah, the framing game. This is a classic example of political reframing, designed purely to shift public perception.
How does it work?
The idea is to present the bill as a working families tax cut bill.
Mm-hmm.
And this is based on polling data from Tony Fabrizio, Donald Trump's longtime pollster. His data showed that while the BBB bill as a whole polled badly, the tax cut components themselves polled quite well in crucial battleground districts.
To just cherry pick the popular part.
Exactly. Change the narrative even if the substance remains the same complex package.
Okay, so what are these tax cuts specifically? Are they genuinely new, broad, and impactful for most people? Or are they more selectively beneficial?
Well, they're a rather complicated mix. Some provisions simply make permanent the tax cuts from the 2017 tax bill.
The Trump tax cuts.
Yeah, which will be a tough sell politically because people won't actually see a difference in their paychecks now compared to last year. It's not a new cut for them.
Right, it's just status quo.
Exactly. A few changes are genuinely new, like no tax on tips, though this primarily just legalizes what many cash-tipped individuals were probably already doing.
Okay.
The most noticeable new change is an increased itemized deduction of up to $40,000 for state and local taxes, the SALT deduction.
Ah, SALT. That mostly benefits.
Right. That largely benefits well-off suburbanites in blue states rather than a broad base of working families across the country.
Okay, so given that specific breakdown, will these particular tax cuts actually be enough to sway a significant number of voters, especially for those who might also be absorbing Medicaid cuts or other hits from the bill? Does the reframing hold up to the reality?
Well, the political effectiveness is pretty questionable, considering that joint filers already get an automatic standard deduction of, $31,000 without itemizing.
Right.
The $40,000 itemized SALT deduction isn't a huge difference for many, and it's certainly not a major boon for working families broadly defined.
So the target audience is pretty narrow.
Very narrow. The number of people who might actually switch sides politically due to these specific tax cuts is likely quite small. And for those who will be negatively impacted by Medicaid cuts or other changes within the bill, these tax cuts are unlikely to make much difference at all. The overall result for them will still be negative.
So the messaging might clash with the reality for many.
Exactly. It really highlights the challenge of political messaging when the underlying economic reality for many people is far more complex and often less appealing than the chosen frame.
What a deep dive today. Wow. We've navigated a truly fascinating and, at times, pretty unsettling landscape.
Yeah, definitely unsettling.
From the intricate political battles over the Epstein files and government funding, to the critical shifts in public health policy impacting vaccines, through the resilience of institutions like Harvard, and then the alarming vulnerability of our national security to cyber threats. It's a lot to process, and the connections between these stories are, well, undeniable.
Indeed. Understanding these interconnected issues, spotting the patterns of power and political maneuvering, and recognizing the motivations behind these policy decisions is just absolutely essential.
Okay.
These aren't just isolated headlines, right? They are forces actively shaping our daily lives and our future.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. As you reflect on everything we've covered today, that constant clash between political expediency and the public good, the integrity of our institutions, the pressing need for long-term strategic thinking, maybe consider this. How do we, as informed citizens, encourage leaders to consistently prioritize evidence-based decisions and true accountability over short-term gains and, well, partisan maneuvering?
Something truly vital to think about as you go about your week. Definitely food for thought.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.